Amelia Hill from The Guardian mentioned that Dr. Terry Apter recently conducted some studies on the effects of mother and daughter-in-law relationships. In his new book, What Do You Want From Me?, he states that 2/3 of daughter-in-laws believe that their husbands' mothers frequently exhibited jealous maternal love towards their son. So a few years ago, when me and my husband had just gotten married, my mother-in-law requested that when my husband baptized his nephew, that he remove his wedding ring and state that he wasn't married if asked by the priest. The reason for that is because some churches don't allow you to baptize a child if you have been married outside of the church. So that was our case. However, I was still not okay with this request. My husband ended up going through with it, and it caused issues between him and me and my mother-in-law for quite some time. My name is Cynthia, and I'm going to be discussing attribution theory between a mother and daughter-in-law relationship, relationships between a woman and a mother-in-law, and how they can be improved by evaluating whether perceived attributes are based on realistic information or misperceptions. We will also be analyzing whether internal or external circumstances apply to the situation, evaluating whether the behavior is consistent or reoccurring. Determining whether the behavior is due to personality or whether it is circumstantial is very important as well. Research by Christine Rittenauer and Jody Kellis states that a number of communication behaviors interfering in family affairs and making the daughter feel unwelcome in family rituals often causes hurtfulness, and it results in a perception of devaluation. This applies to Chapter 6, Interpersonal Perception, Stage 3, Interpreting. Interpreting behavior as stemming from malicious intent or circumstantial could affect how one could proceed with the next step, which is, or the next step of attribution theory. Did the offender intend to cause harm? Is the behavior consistent with the offender's past behavior? History of making requests that are purposely hurtful? Or is the behavior inconsistent? Has this not occurred before? Did it catch you out of the blue? If the person could, would they have avoided the behavior? Or was it out of their control? And you should also logically consider if the events could have been caused by external influences. If someone was late to pick you up, were they just at home dallying, or did they get stuck in traffic? Big things to consider before jumping to any conclusions. So initially, I believed that my relationship with my mother-in-law in that situation was an internal, controllable, but unstable attribute. The attributions I made were under the assumption that she was trying to assert her role as the controller of the family and was willing to disregard my marriage in the process. One hypothesis of Christine Rittenauer and Jody Kellis is that the daughter-in-law regarding the behavior of the mother-in-law affects the relationship between the married couple as well. The study was based on an experiment of 132 females who are in-laws. The hypothesis, there were 3 of them. One of them was whether or not the daughter-in-law, if she already had a negative relationship with the mother-in-law, if that would cause her to believe that circumstances were more internally attributed. Hypothesis 2 is if the relationship were positive, whether or not the external attributions would be more considered by the daughter-in-law. And hypothesis 3 is whether or not having an opposite stance on the attributes of the mother-in-law would cause issues in a relationship with the spouses. So research did conclude that a negative relationship between a mother and daughter-in-law can cause the daughter-in-law to believe that more of the behavior is internally attributed. And if you have a positive relationship with your mother-in-law, they have concluded that you are more likely to consider external attributes if anything were to occur. And it was also, there was also studies that showed that if you are not on the same page with your spouse or significant other on attributes concerning the mother-in-law, that there can be problems in that relationship. So one thing that I learned about the attribute theory is that situations should not make me feel rejected or displaced, because sometimes it might not be personal. Sometimes it can be just, based on the current circumstances. And the first step I took to applying this information was sitting down with my mother-in-law and discussing the situation, because I felt like so much time had gone by and my imagination ran wild with the information, and it was best to just put the cards on the table. And definitely, I'm glad that I did that, because my assumptions, my attributes towards the situation were wrong. My mother-in-law did not mean to cause me any harm, and she did state that she was more single-minded in terms of how to get my husband to be the father-in-law, and didn't consider how it would affect me. So I'm very happy that I had that conversation. I will say the issue could have been resolved sooner had I properly applied the attribution theory in my thought process. And moving forward, I know that not all behavior should be taken personally, and jumping to conclusions can hinder the growth of any relationship. So in conclusion, attribution theory is something to consider to improve the relationship between in-laws. Thank you.